It's really connected to some of the work that we do. And when most people think about cities and towns, they think about buildings and streets and noisy cars, kind of like what we just saw. But when I think about cities and towns, I think about people. They are fundamentally about people. And it's people that make cities and towns more than just a place on a map. When where people go and where people meet is at the core of what makes a community work. And everybody wants, needs a place to call home. You can ask E.T. But a home is more than just the four walls or the roof and the front porch of your house. It's a place of belonging. It's a place that's safe and secure. It's a place where you raise your children and you make memories with your friends. It's a place where you walk your dog or go for a bike ride or have a picnic. It's really a community that makes a home. And it's communities that we are looking to build. So even more importantly than the buildings within our communities are the public spaces in between them. And as Pamela talked about, placemaking has been the core of what we do. I believe that lively, enjoyable public spaces are the keys to planning great communities, and that community participation is at the core of what makes those places great. And now we're going to look at an example of community participation and what makes a great place, and an example that we'll all relate to. So by the summer of 1855, the Statue of Liberty was in New York, in pieces, awaiting assembly. And the U.S. had been unable to raise the nearly $250,000 for the granite plinth, which would sit at the bottom of the statue. It's about $6.3 million in today's funding. New York Governor Grover Cleveland rejected the use of city funds for it. Congress couldn't come up with a funding package. Other cities, Baltimore, Boston, San Francisco, Pittsburgh, were all bidding for the statue. In return, the relocation. New York had seemed to run out of ideas, and what were they going to do? And then renowned publisher John Pulitzer put up a funding campaign in his newspaper, The New York World. This, to me, is probably the first civic crowdfunding campaign in all of America in 1885. And eventually, the campaign raised money from more than 160,000 people, from politicians to street cleaners to children, and everyone in between. And a majority of those donations were under $1. In 5 months, they raised nearly $101,000, or over $101,000, enough to cover the final portion, the $100,000, to put in the granite pedestal. And they even had money left over for a gift to the sculptor. To me, this is a clear example of civic crowdfunding to complete a community project that has given us all a place to call home, that allows us to continue to build the vibrant communities that we so cherish. And so Patronicity is a civic and community-based crowdfunding platform, which basically means we run locally driven community projects like parks, murals, sculptures, farmers markets, community gardens, pavilions, trails, and the ideas have been endless. And they look to garner support from community businesses, local residents within the community and the neighborhood. We started in Detroit in 2012, and my partner got the inspiration from running a successful Kickstarter campaign, taking a film he was working on all the way to Sundance. And we thought, and we, being based out of Detroit, we recognized this city faces so many challenges, from blight to bankruptcy to lack of access to resources to misrepresentation. I mean, that list goes on. But Detroiters are incredible individuals, and they really take it upon themselves to be, see, and make that change. And we thought, what if we could take the impact Kickstarter had within the arts and turn it and transform it towards community development? We recognized through crowdfunding on Kickstarter, it opened up two major doors. One, for artists looking for funding for their projects, which was quite limited to very few and narrow avenues. And two, for everyday people like you and I to become patrons towards the arts. which was usually reserved for the wealthy elite. But here, it opened up a door for local governments, cities. We thought we could open up a door for local governments, cities, and community organizations that could gain access to funding for community projects, and that everyday people could become patrons of their city by supporting projects with small donations. Thus, Patronicity was born. And we also had this vision for a matching funds model. We recognized granting organizations were already funding community-centered projects very similar to the ones on Patronicity. And we developed this model we call Crowdgranting. And in 2014, in June of 2014, we partnered with the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. And we ran a statewide program called Public Spaces, Community Places. And this was really innovative. All that we have in Flint, we also have a lot of positivity coming from the MEDC. It's a little bit different from the state government, but it's a really simple process. And it was a leap of faith for them. But the application process is so simple, where projects apply through Patronicity, and they do that by simply creating a crowdfunding project page. And that is something anyone can do. Grants are usually quite difficult. You might have to hire someone to write it, or have the technical know-how how to write a grant. But a crowdfunding project page is directed towards their audience or potential donors. It's a fun and exciting and engaging page that shows what the project is, what the funding's needed, and how people can be a part of the transformational process and the creation of a public space. The granting organization does the final review, and we've worked it down all the way to 72 hours, saving them tons of time, money, where they can spend less time evaluating projects and more time supporting the communities that they're a part of. And here's the beauty about this whole program. The community is the final review committee, where if a project reaches its funding goal through citizen support, they receive the match. How simple is that? It's as easy as just crowdfunding your project page. And it's a great tool for everyday citizens to be a part of creating incredible spaces and places within their neighborhoods. We saw the granting process as oftentimes quite biased and inefficient. The traditional grant program is oftentimes a black box, where many projects apply, a long time goes by, you don't really know what happens, and few are selected. Oftentimes, it might be someone that knew someone at the granting agency that slid their application down the table, or they applied for the grant and got it last year, and the year before that, and the year before that. And it was a system that they were in. But our crowd granting process is a little bit different, where many projects can apply. And so long they fit within the parameters of the grant, which we do the vetting on, the community votes with their dollars, and at the end, many projects are then funded. We knew we could not only double the dollars going into communities, but streamline the evaluation and approval process, as well as amplifying the attention for both the projects and the matching grant organization. And lastly, we were garnering a deeper sense of civic and community engagement that the MEDC was unable to leverage previously. This whole process is really democratizing the access of capital for these driven communities. And it's people behind them that are championing these projects. And since the launch of this program, over 90 projects have run in Michigan in communities across the state, from rural towns to Detroit and Lansing and urban centers, and from blue-collar towns. There was a town called Ironwood, and it's 5,000 people, and they raised $15,000 through crowdfunding and got a matching grant on that. And then they were awarded another grant because they showcased the community involvement from Art Place, and it just built onto their success. And now other organizations, other granting organizations, foundations, nonprofits are looking to Michigan and to Patronicity on replicating this program. And the MEDC recognized with us that communities are about people, and that those public spaces are important. But it's because it's the people in the communities that know what is needed and most wanted. We look to empower them to help create those best places. So we wanted, so what's the trick? How do you turn a park into a place people want to be? We wanted to help people find their very own seat and their very own bench or gathering spot or local hangout within their community. And now we've transformed dozens of vacant lots into green alleys and pavilions, from barren buildings into co-working spaces and vibrant murals, and abandoned parks into playscapes and farmers markets and more. And really, public spaces cannot be taken for granted. They need the entire community's support to be valued and maintained. This whole idea of civic crowdfunding has caught and community engagement, and this type of community engagement has caught the interest of a lot of people. And we recently worked with a few professors at the University of Michigan who are doing research on how and why citizens want to support community projects through crowdfunding. They found that thriving neighborhoods boast features like community gardens, and parks, and art, and public spaces, and green spaces, all types of projects featured on Patronicity. And through interviews and research, they found that people are not only willing to, but excited to help in any way and help fund these types of projects within their neighborhood. Crowdfunding is a very transparent model, and it can showcase exactly what an organization or a municipality is proposing to create, and allows residents and citizens to chip in small dollar amounts to help make those public spaces possible. The interview showed community donors are more connected to those spaces, and those spaces become and remain far more active. Furthermore, those spaces are better maintained for and cared for. When you throw in $5, $50, $500 into a neighborhood parklet or a mural, you're gonna make sure you have a skin in the game. You're invested into that space. You're gonna make sure that it remains clean, it's not graffitied, and that it remains active, and you're gonna be a part of that space. You are a patron of that space. And our crowd granting model really makes citizens feel more assured that their dollars are being well supported by a larger matching grant, and that it's gonna help establish that space, double their dollars, and their dollars are going farther, and it'll be all well supported. And so we've created an opportunity for local governments, cities, and organizations to reach out to their citizens, and not only garner support, but funding for public space and community place projects across the state. Research shows a more active citizen, an involved citizen, is a happier citizen. Now, I want to turn to a couple examples from our program. And this one, Becca Wallace, she's a project leader in Ypsilanti, Michigan, who transformed an abandoned auto electric shop. I used to have a before picture of it, but didn't work. And she transformed it into a nonprofit cafe and gathering space. And she said, crowdfunding was a way for community members to become emotionally bought into their space and its mission before they opened. Amanda Edmonds, the mayor of Ypsilanti, also ran a crowdfunding campaign for a year-round farmers market, where the crowdfunding effort not only enabled the build-out of this new space, but also drew attention to the market's relocation. I always say the crowd comes before the funding. It's as much of a marketing campaign as it is a funding campaign. And what they did was, after 10 years of operating under tents, the market moved and relocated to an old bank that had been laid vacant for over a year. Now, from these projects in Ypsilanti, we saw an increased awareness to the redevelopment of spaces that had become forgotten and invisible to the public eye, which prior to the crowdfunding efforts. There were transformations of vacant, abandoned spaces into vibrant community assets, and that's what drives us, and that's what excites us. Another project in Royal Oak, Michigan, truly exemplifies the community engagement that can come from it. They wanted to transform a rundown pedestrian plaza into a tech-friendly green space. And they needed about $120,000 after design and build to complete the space. So they crowdfunded $60,000 and got a match of $60,000. But in 30 days, they far exceeded their goal, and they raised over $100,000 that came pouring in from community businesses and residents and citizens in support of the project. And the park includes public Wi-Fi, mobile device charging stations, interactive kiosk guides, seating. It also has a rain garden to collect stormwater and pollutants to prevent runoff from entering the Clinton River watershed. And this is just like a perfect example. It's environmentally sound, it has tech-friendly elements, and it's transforming what used to be a terrible space into a very beautiful, bright, vibrant, and green space. And the crowdfunding campaign was widely successful, and people responded really well to fixing this rundown space. But this part of the community involvement was only the beginning. The children at the Royal Oak Elementary School worked together with submissions to rename the park Eagle Plaza. And college students designed an augmented reality app to allow visitors to play interactive 3D chess and checkers. My dad was excited because he doesn't understand Pokemon Go, and he's like, I can play that game. And so it's actually not very far from where I live. And lastly, I wanted to share one of my favorite stories from what we do and what we've experienced is this was one of our first projects, and I was very connected to it because it was one of our first projects, and we were still the MEDC wasn't sure if this is still going to work. And this is in 2014. We just launched the program, and InReach is a community art center in Rio Town, Lansing. It's underserved and underdeveloped area in Lansing. And Lansing this community center is in the backyard of the MEDC. And so they applied, and because it was only the third project, the MEDC is like, we don't know these guys. So in a traditional grant program, they actually wanted to close the door. And we said, wait, let the program and let our program just run its course. It fits what we want to do. They want to transform. They bought up all the buildings on their block, and they wanted to transform the next one into, there's a garden behind it and a gallery for the kids to feature their art. And they said, okay. They surprised us. I mean, they raised over almost $50,000 in a short time, and they achieved their goal, and they got a matching grant of $48,000, and they created this very beautiful space, and they even preserved a historical Pillsbury mural that they discovered in the renovation. And this just blew us away. The other things that we found is it opened up a door to more funding. A majority of the people that, this is an organization, it's a nonprofit that gets all of its money and all of its funding yearly from donors. And a majority of them were new donors to this space. The other thing we think of crowdfunding, we think of an online experience. And a majority of people did hear about it from newspapers. One of the most exciting things with Patronicity is we wanted to open up the doors to allow offline and online engagement. There are communities, rural communities, elder communities, and people in Detroit that are unbanked, so they don't have access to internet or credit cards. We want to allow them to be a part of transformation and a part of creating these spaces. And so we have an easy way to accept offline donations. And in this first project, I used to see all the offline donations, and usually they're like cash or checks, and they'd come in whole amounts, like $25 or $50 or $100 or whatever. And I saw one for $63.50, and I reached out to the lead of the project. I was like, okay, it looks awesome. People are really supporting things. I saw an entry for $63.50 for an offline donation. Is that a typo? What's the story behind that? And she responded. She was like, it's incredible. We've received so much support that we've been overwhelmed. The community loves it. And to tell you the story, the $63.50 is not a misentry. There was a little girl, Bethany. She's 8 years old. And she saw the community coming together and wanting to fund and create this space for them. And she wanted to support it. But Bethany really doesn't have much in her bank account. So with the help of her mom, she ran a bake sale. And she contributed all of the money that she raised from her cookies and brownies to this campaign. And to me, when I heard that, that just proved that what we're doing is we're opening up that door. We're allowing anyone and everyone to be a part of the transformation of that space. And the program in Michigan has been incredibly successful. There's some numbers there, but really it's that people are creating places that matter to them. For us, crowdfunding for these types of spaces is incredibly empowering. We're opening up a door to funding public space projects that was previously not there. The grant dollars are being better allocated to meaningful projects, and citizens feel more connected to their communities. We're really excited. We launched a program with the state of Massachusetts, and in October this month, we're launching with the state of Indiana. We're talking to a few corporations and foundations to launch other programs that also match dollars. And public spaces, to me, are really important. They can change how you live in a community and how you feel about a community, whether you choose one community over another. And most importantly, it's the reason why you choose to stay in a community. I believe a successful community is like a fabulous party. We stay because we're having a great time. Thanks.